habari gani, Mainduga, Nadada, wherever you may be located at this particular time in history. My brothers and sisters, I would like to share some information with you that is very important information. Some of you may be aware of it, others of you may not. So my brothers and sisters, if you are not familiar with this information I'm about to share with you, please take a moment and listen to it. Now, this information is taken from a book I wrote several years back called Reparations and God's Judgment. Reparations and God's Judgment. Now, my brothers and sisters, as I stated, I would like to share one of the gems in this compilation I have researched and dutifully provided for your edification. Now, many of you claim Indian ancestry. This might be a fact. And what I'm going to share with you today is the American Indian involvement in our chattel enslavement. It's taken from this book, and I quote, "It is true that some Indian tribes did fight side by side with African Americans during the Seminole Wars in Florida against the common enemy, the white slave master and his supporters. It is also true that the major tribes were as involved in enslaving as Thomas Jefferson on the southern plantation slave owners. In the early colonial period in America, Europeans were careful to discourage alliances between blacks and Indians in most of the Indian treaties. Most of these treaties required Indians to aid in the capture of runaway slaves and to turn them over to local authority or owners. Indians were involved in slave trading and found how extremely profitable it was. By the end of the 18th century, the so-called civilized Indian societies were slave traders and owners and fought alongside the Southern Confederacy in the Civil War to maintain slavery and protect their economic interests. The following are 5 very important factors we must become aware of. 1. In 1824, there were 1,275 black slaves being held among 15,560 Cherokees. Number 2, in 1861, 25,000 Choctaw and Chickasaw Indians owned more than 5,000 black slaves. Number 3, in a tree in Fort Smith, Arkansas in September 1865, the Choctaws and Chickasaws were paid $300,000 by the U.S. government for a district of lands west of the 98th longitude. Essentially, the treaty provided that the U.S. government pay the Choctaw and Chickasaw legislatures $300,000 plus 5% interest for the land contingent upon the Indians drafting laws and rules to free all their black slaves and to give each black slave and their descendants 40 acres of land from each nation. Number 4, Also, in addition to the 80 acres to have been given to each slave, each tribe was to give each slave $1 per capita. The treaty further stipulated that should the Indian legislatures not craft these laws for black slaves within a 2-year time period from the ratification of the treaty, the $300,000 shall cease to be held in trust for the Indians and given instead to the black ex-slaves. Point number 5. A contingency of ex-slaves traveled to Washington, D.C. in the early 1870s and complained to Congress that they never received the 80 acres of land nor the monies. Unquote. It's taken from page 83 through 84 of the book, Reparations and God's Judgment by yours truly. This book can be secured from Amazon.com and BarnesandNobles.com. Or you can search for it through Google, and Google will provide other suppliers of the book. But my people, you need to read this book. This book is full of documented evidence that illustrates without a doubt that the black people who live in the United States and are descendants of those who are defined as slaves deserve reparations. But they must understand no one is just going to give them reparations, but they must demand reparations. Until you make a demand with consequences, if the demand is not met, you shall not receive what is due you and receive justice for your ancestors and your ancestors' descendants who live today. If you understand what I mean, my brothers and sisters, it's time for us to come together, to act as one, and demand justice in the United States of America. Once again, peace and hotep to you, my Induga na Dada.